I don't tell this story often, not because I'm scared people won't believe me, most don't, but because talking about it brings me back there, back to those nights in the Appalachian wilderness where something was watching me, hunting me. I went into the mountains alone, planning a full week of trail camping. I'd done solo hikes before, but this was the longest I've ever attempted. I wanted the solitude, the challenge. Just me, nature, and the silence. But I wasn't alone, not after the second night. And by the time I left those mountains, I knew, without a doubt, that something unnatural was living up there. Something with teeth. The first 2 days were perfect. Crisp autumn air, the scent of damp earth, the endless quiet of the mountains. I'd set up a tent near a small stream about 10 miles from the nearest trailhead, completely off the beaten path. It was the third night when I heard it. I just doused my fire and crawled into my tent when a sound echoed through the trees, a long guttural howl. Not a wolf, not a coyote. This was something else, something big. It had a depth to it, a resonance that I felt in my bones. It was far away, but the sound carried through the mountains, lingering in the mist that had rolled in with the night. I lay there, listening, gripping my knife. The forest went dead silent afterward. No crickets, no owls, not even the wind in the trees. That should have been my first warning. The next night, I set up camp deeper in the woods, near a rocky ridge. The feeling of unease hadn't left me, but I pushed it down. I told myself it was just my imagination, just the wild playing tricks on me. Then I saw the eyes. I was sitting by the fire, eating a meal out of a can, when something blinked at me from the tree line. 2 eyes, reflective, too high off the ground to belong to a deer. I froze. My breath caught up in my throat. The fire crackled, sending shadows dancing, but the eyes didn't move. I slowly reached for my flashlight and clicked it on. Nothing. Just trees, leaves rustling in the wind. No sign of whatever had been watching me. But I wasn't imagining it. I barely slept that night. Every twig snap, every shifting shadow outside my tent had me gripping my knife, waiting. Morning couldn't come faster enough. By the 5th day, I knew something was following me. I woke up to find tracks near my campsite. Large, canine-like, prints but wrong. Too big, too deep, and they walked on 2 legs. They circled my tent. I packed up fast and moved as far as I could before sunset. That night, I built my fire bigger than before, hoping whatever was out there would keep its distance. It didn't. The 6th night was the worst. I was sitting close to the fire, knife in hand, when the howling started again. But this time, it wasn't distant. It was close. And there was more than one. The sound sent a chill through me, a low rising howl that turned into a growl halfway through, like something was trying to speak but couldn't. Then the bushes rustled. I grabbed my flashlight, sweeping it across the trees. That's when I saw it. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, hunched over, covered in dark matted fur. A broad muscular body, but the head was all wrong. A wolf's snout, too long, too sharp, and those eyes, amber colored, filled with hunger. It bared its teeth at me, lips curling back into a snarl that looked almost human. Then another set of eyes appeared behind it, and another. There were at least 3 of them. I raised my hunting rifle, not sure if a bullet would even stop something like that. My heart pounded, but I stood my ground, gripping the stock with sweaty hands. They didn't charge, they just watched, testing me. Then just as suddenly as they appeared, they melted back into the trees. But I knew they weren't gone. They were toying with me. I didn't sleep. At the first light of dawn, I grabbed my pack and started moving fast. I didn't care about noise, didn't care if I was leaving tracks. I just needed to get out. but they weren't letting me go so easily. I heard them following me, rustling leaves, snapping branches, always just out of sight. At one point, I caught a glimpse of one, keeping pace with me through the trees, running on all fours. It was too fast. I was being herded. That's when I made the decision. I ditched my gear, my tent, my supplies, everything. I ran with nothing but my knife and my rifle, dodging through trees, taking sharp turns, trying to lose them. The howls picked up again. I don't know how long I ran. Time blurred. My lungs burned. My legs felt like they'd give out, but I didn't stop. And then, suddenly, I saw it. The road. A dirt service road, barely wide enough for a truck, cutting through the forest. I sprinted toward it, lungs heaving, praying for some kind of miracle. And then I heard the growl. Right behind me. I turned, raising my rifle, expecting to see jaws closing in. But there was nothing. Just the trees, the silence. And then slowly, deliberately, a single set of glowing eyes appeared in the shadows, watching. I didn't wait. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my truck, still parked miles away at the trailhead. As I slammed the door and turned the key, I swear I heard it again, the clicking of claws on pavement. And then, just as I pulled away, one last howl. I haven't gone back. I don't hike alone anymore. Hell, I barely go into the woods at all. People ask me if I was just seeing things. If maybe it was a bear or my mind playing tricks on me. I let them believe that. It's easier than the truth, because I know what I saw, and I know it saw me too. I don't go into the woods anymore, not alone, not with my friends, not even with a gun, because once you've seen what I've seen, once you've heard it, you don't take chances. This happened 3 years ago, deep in the Wisconsin North Woods. I was with 3 friends, Mike, Jared, and Luke, and my dog, Bear. It was supposed to be a 3-day hike through the trails, nothing extreme. We weren't idiots, we had gear, maps, a satellite phone. We grew up in Wisconsin, we knew the legends, but none of that prepared us for what was out there, for what followed us, for what was waiting. We set out early, trekking up through thick forest, the trees rising like walls on either side of the trail. The weather was grey, the kind that presses down on you. Bear was excited at first, trotting ahead, sniffing everything, but by midday he changed. His ears went flat, his tail tucked. He started whining at nothing. We figured it was a bear or a wolf nearby. Wisconsin's full of them. Jared even joked about the Wisconsin dogman, but it didn't feel funny. Not with how Bear was acting. Then Luke found the deer carcass. It was fresh, torn open, but something was wrong. The meat wasn't eaten, just stripped away, like something had peeled it off the bones. The skull had been crushed in. Maybe a cougar? Mike muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. Bear started growling at the trees. There was nothing there, nothing we could see. That night, we set up camp near a clearing, got a fire going, tried to shake the tension. Jared passed around a flask, we laughed, tried to pretend the woods weren't watching us. Bear wasn't buying it. He sat stiff, staring out past the firelight, his fur bristling. He wouldn't lay down, wouldn't eat. I'd never seen him like that. Then came the smell. At first it was just a hint of the wind, rotting meat, damp earth, something sour. We thought it was the deer carcass, but it was getting stronger. And then Luke whispered, "Guys, do you see that?" Across the clearing, just beyond the firelight, 2 pinpricks of light hovered in the darkness. Eyes. They were too high up, too far apart. Jared grabbed the flashlight and swept it over. Nothing. The second the light hit the trees, the eyes were gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. Bear lost it, barking and snapping at the darkness. I had to grab his collar to keep him from charging into the woods. Then we heard it. A voice, a whisper. Not from the trees, inside them. It sounded like my mother's voice, calling my name. My mother had been dead for 4 years. None of us slept that night. By morning, we were exhausted, but we kept moving. None of us talked about what happened. By midday, Jared wasn't keeping up. He looked pale, his breath ragged. My stomach's killing me, he muttered, rubbing his gut. By sunset, he couldn't walk. We set up camp again, trying to keep him comfortable. He was burning up, his skin clammy. He said he was starving, but when I handed him food, he gagged. Then, around midnight, he started whispering to himself. I thought he was delirious, but then Luke nudged me. He's not talking to himself, he whispered. He's talking to something else. Jared's lips were moving, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was low, wet, and wrong. Then he screamed. We lunged to grab him, but he bolted into the woods. We ran after him, the flashlight beams bouncing off the trees, and then we saw it. Jared was standing in a clearing, facing something tall. At first I thought it was just another tree. Then it moved. A twisted, emaciated thing, its skin stretched tight over sharp bones, antlers curling up its skull. Its eyes burned white. Its mouth, God, its mouth was split too wide, stretching up its cheeks like it was grinning. Jared dropped to his knees. It leaned down, sniffing him. I don't remember who fired first. The gunshot rang out, the thing screeched, a horrible shrieking sound that rattled my skull. Jared collapsed. The thing lurched back into the trees, moving too fast, too unnatural. We grabbed Jared and ran. Bear was barking like a demon, snapping at the darkness. Then Jared screamed again, clutching his side. His skin was blackening, like it had rotted from the inside out. We carried Jared through the night. He was shaking, muttering in that same wet voice. By the time we reached the road, he wasn't speaking anymore, just staring. We got him to a hospital. The doctor said it was severe dehydration, exposure, exhaustion. They didn't see the black veins under his skin. Jared never recovered. A month later, he disappeared. His wife said he woke up in the middle of the night, walked into the woods behind their house, and never came back. I don't care if you believe me or not. I wouldn't have believed it myself if it hadn't happened to me. But after that day, I don't go hiking alone anymore. Hell, I barely step into the woods at all. It was supposed to be a short hike, just a couple of hours. I'd been out that way before, maybe a dozen times. There's a stretch of woods about an hour outside of town, mostly quiet, not too much people go there. That's why I liked it. No crowds, no noise, just the sound of the trees, the wind, and my own footsteps on the dirt. Then I caught a whiff of something, rotting, musky, wet fur. I figured it was a deer carcass or something, but the smell wasn't coming from anywhere specific. It was just around me. And then I saw the footprints. They weren't fresh, but they were huge, like a barefoot human print, only twice the size, and with deep, distinct toes pressed into the mud. I stopped, my brain scrambling for an explanation. Could have been a hoax, right? Some jackass messing with people. But out here? That didn't make sense. Then I heard it. A low, guttural grunt. It wasn't close, but it was big. It had weight to it, like the sound of something deep-chested and massive. I told myself it was a bear. Had to be, but that didn't explain the footprints. I kept walking, trying to shake the unease, but the further I went, the worse it got. That smell, wet fur, rot, and something else I couldn't place. It wasn't going away. It was getting stronger. Then the trees moved. Not the wind. Something moved between them. I only caught a glimpse. Something dark, tall, shifting through the trees ahead. Not running, not walking, just there, and then gone. I stopped cold. I didn't want to go forward, but I sure as hell didn't want to turn back the way I came either. That's when I noticed the forest had gone silent again. No wind, no animals, just my own breath, ragged and too loud. And then branches snapping. Not little twigs, thick branches, cracking like they were nothing. It was coming closer. I didn't wait to see what it was. I started walking faster, but I kept my steps quiet, careful. Whatever it was, I didn't want it knowing where I was. Then I heard it. Breathe. Not behind me, beside me, in the trees. It was keeping pace with me. I turned my head slowly, just enough to see out of my peripheral vision. And that's when I saw it. Not clearly, not yet, but enough. A figure, too big, too tall, walking between the trees, watching me. I picked up my pace. It picked up its pace. I wasn't running yet, but my legs were itching too. My body knew before my brain did I was in danger. Then ahead on the trail, another set of prints, fresh. The mud was still wet from where it had stepped. And that's when I realized this wasn't one set of prints looping back. There were two. That was it. My body decided for me. I ran. I don't know if you've ever sprinted through the woods before, but it's not like the movies. You don't move in a straight line, the ground is uneven, the branches claw at you, and every step is a gamble. But I didn't care. I needed to get out of there. Behind me, I heard it move. Not running, pounding, covering way too much distance, way too fast. I heard heavy footfalls, the crunch of bark as it pushed off trees, and worst of all, that breathing. It wasn't human, it wasn't an animal, it was something in between. I made the mistake of looking back, and I saw it. Not just a shadow this time, massive, covered in matted dark fur, shoulders hunched, arms too long, swinging low as it moved on two legs, eyes reflecting the dim light, burning, intelligent. And its mouth was slightly open, not snarling, not growling, just open like it was tasting the air. I didn't scream, I didn't have the breath for it, I just ran. And then gunshots. Not from me, from somewhere ahead. Two quick cracks, then a third. I didn't stop running, but whatever was behind me did. I heard it, a deep, angry, guttural sound. Not fear, not pain, just pissed off. Then crashing, branches snapping, something retreating, fast. I burst out of the trees onto an old access road, nearly colliding with an older man in a flannel jacket, rifle still raised. He didn't say a word at first, just scanned the trees, listening. I was panting, bent over, trying to force words out. Finally, he looked at me. They don't always attack, but they do like to chase. He walked me back to his truck, gave me a bottle of water, and told me he'd been hunting out here for years, that he'd seen the prints, heard the noises, even caught glimpses, but he never stuck around long enough for a close encounter. I asked him why he fired his gun if he knew it wouldn't kill whatever that was. He just said, sometimes you just gotta remind them who's holding the bigger stick. I don't know what I saw that day, but I know what I felt. Something was hunting me, not to kill, just to see what I'd do.